I'm Gary Humble with Tennessee Stands, and this is my statement in support of House Bill 10, Senate Bill 7, the Religious Exemption Protection Act. This bill is critical. It's so important to what are some bedrocks of our nation and our state, and that's religious liberty and rights of conscience. And there's a few things I just sort of want to say as I set this up. It's interesting, you can go to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and it doesn't talk about just a freedom of religion or a freedom of belief or right to sort of believe whatever you want. No, it literally and specifically talks about the free exercise of religion. That word exercise is an interesting word. It implies something way beyond belief. There are some that would say, well, government, while it can secure a right of conscience, it has the right to reach down and compel actions. I would say not so much so that it would be against someone's rights of conscience. When we exercise our religion, that goes beyond simply what we believe. Obviously, we act out our religion in the very things that we say and that we do. Fact is, Christians, we know that in the book of James, chapter 2, verse 26, says that our faith without works is dead. And Madison had a bit more to say when he wrote this statement in the Virginia Declaration of Rights. He said that all men are entitled to the full and free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience. And further, in a memorial and remonstrance, he stated this point: all that the religion then of every man must be left to the conviction and conscience of every man. So when we think about, well, who gets to define what a right of conscience is? Is that simply within the purview of government to define conscience? Madison was clear that when we talk about the free exercise of religion and when we tie that to a right of conscience, there needs to be room that the individual himself must be allowed to determine what those convictions and what his conscience is as to how he follows and worships his God. So when we think about vaccines, which of course we know this bill is dealing with, we're working to secure a religious exemption to vaccines. Again, some might say, well, vaccines don't have anything to do with religion. I wholeheartedly disagree. And there are a few reasons why I think you can tie vaccines directly to a right of conscience. But let's just go straight to the heart of the matter, to the most obvious one, and that's the use of aborted fetal cells. Now, there's been a lot of controversy over whether or not that's true. There's a lot of things out in the media, but let me just tell you something right now. It is 100% absolute, true, and confirmed fact that aborted fetal tissue is used in the testing, the development, and the production of many, if not most, vaccines. In fact, on my computer screen, I'm looking at an article right now that was written, aired on PBS in 2015. The name of the article is "Scientists Say Fetal Tissue Remains Essential for Vaccines and Developing Treatments." This article came out in 2015 around the time that the undercover videos were coming out about Planned Parenthood, that they were selling off baby parts and whatnot from abortions. But even all the way down to the COVID vaccine, we have the verified reports now of how these vaccines have been developed. But before I even get to that, I'll just mention the MMR vaccine, vaccine for varicella, chickenpox, and the hepatitis A vaccine. All three of those vaccines, 100% of them, there is no other what's considered ethical choice. All three of those vaccines are manufactured using aborted fetal tissue. All of them. And coincidentally, all three of those vaccines are mandated by the state of Tennessee for all of our children, including children attending our public schools. Specifically regarding the COVID-19 vaccine, all five of the vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and GlaxoSmithKline, all five of those vaccines in some way, shape, or form use aborted fetal tissue in the testing phase, the development phase, and some in the continued production. It's worth noting that the Pfizer vaccine used here in Tennessee, while it does not use aborted fetal tissue in the continued production of the vaccine, it did use aborted fetal tissue in the testing and development of the vaccine, specifically the HEK 293 cell line, which is a derivative of some kidney tissue from a baby that was aborted in 1973. Now, there's another cell line, PER.C6, that's a proprietary line that is used by Johnson & Johnson, and that came from the retinal cells of an 18-week-old baby that was aborted in 1985. These are all stated scientific fact. In fact, you can, there's a link with this video. You can download my full testimony. It's a fully referenced report. And all of the references to these facts are in that report. And so I invite you to download and look for yourself. But the point is this: when you have vaccines, something that you're injecting into your body, all of which, at least in regards to COVID-19, are somehow made or developed or tested with aborted fetal tissue, it's certainly reasonable to imagine that for many people, this would be a matter of conscience as to whether or not this person wanted to take this vaccine. North Dakota Health Department actually published a paper available on their website acknowledging that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines used this HEK 293 cell line in the testing and development. And they made a really interesting statement. They say they used the cell line, but then they say this: any vaccine that relies on these historic cell lines will not require new abortions. So understand what's being said here. In other words, don't worry. Only previous abortions were required to make these vaccines. We're not going to have any new ones. So you're telling me that conscientiously I'm supposed to accept, according to my faith, that I'm supposed to inject something into my body, and the only way it's plausible that we have it is for at some point in time for babies to have been aborted. And of course, for the continuing and development of these vaccines, this fetal tissue is vital, according to many scientists and researchers. Certainly, I don't need to explain any further for most of you why this plays into a religious liberty issue, and certainly for many, a right or a liberty of conscience to determine whether or not someone would like to go through with receiving a vaccine tied to that kind of history. That for you, I would like to say all Christians, but unfortunately not. But I would think anyone who's a follower of Jesus would say this is not something that we can condone or take part in. But I'll close with the simple constitutional issue. And it's not a matter of good and bad, or vaccines good or vaccines bad, or any of those sorts of things. Another question we have to ask ourselves is simply what government can and what can it not do? How far does our Constitution in the state of Tennessee allow our government to go concerning our actions and concerning our rights of conscience? I would go to Article 1, Section 3 of our Tennessee State Constitution, which says this: all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own conscience. It goes on to say in the same section that no human authority can in any case whatever control or interfere with the rights of conscience. That's an incredibly strong statement. I actually did a little bit of digging to see if that statement existed anywhere else, and it does. Interestingly, that exact statement also exists in Article 1, Section 3 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, written by none other than Benjamin Franklin. And when you think about, well, what does writing something like that really, really mean in terms of securing individual liberty? Well, when Benjamin Franklin wrote that, You can go directly to the preamble of Pennsylvania's Constitution, which sort of states the intention of why they're writing what they're writing. And you can take that in this Article 1, Section 3 and apply that to the exact same statement in our Tennessee Constitution. So why would you say something like that? Well, we the people, grateful to Almighty God for the blessings of civil and religious liberty, and humbly invoking his guidance, do ordain and establish this Constitution. That's an amazing preamble to the Pennsylvania Constitution, that the whole thing was written and premised on civil and religious liberty. Thankfully, the men who wrote our Tennessee Constitution wrote our Constitution with the very same intention, to preserve and protect and defend individual liberties, and most certainly religious liberties. It's interesting, even they further secured that liberty in Article 11, Section 16 of our Constitution, by saying that everything in our Bill of Rights, everything in Article 1, including our freedom to exercise our religion and including our rights of conscience, are accepted out of the general powers of the government and shall forever remain inviolate. Which means, per our Constitution, at no point in time is the legislature or any member of the government formed by our Constitution given the authority to remove these rights from the people. They are guaranteed and secured by the Constitution of this state. I would close by saying this. I would remind every legislator that would watch this video the oath that you swore whenever you took office. And by the way, in case you weren't aware, that oath that you took actually sits in our Constitution. It's Article 10, Section 2 of the Tennessee Constitution. And the oath that you took ended with simply this, that you will not consent to any act or thing whatever that shall have a tendency to lessen or abridge their, meaning the people's rights and privileges, as declared by the Constitution of this state. I simply want to remind you as legislators that our Constitution has not given you a duty to the public health. In fact, interestingly, the word health is not mentioned anywhere in our state constitution. There is not a supreme duty to the public health of the people of this state, but you have, per our Constitution, sworn an oath to uphold our individual and civil liberties per the Constitution, and to not pass any laws that would lessen those rights or privileges to the people. So I implore you, House Bill 10, Senate Bill 7, the Religious Exemption Protection Act, is critical to secure the liberty guaranteed by our Constitution, the rights of conscience, our freedom to exercise our religion are preeminent in our government and who we are as a people. And not only who we are now as Tennesseans, but who we will be for generations to come. Thank you for your time, and please vote yes on this bill.